Good day, everyone, and welcome to our another session in Introduction to the Philosophy of the Human Person. For today's lesson, we will be talking about freedom of the human persons in the context of morality. Before we proceed to a deeper understanding of what is meant by the freedom of the human persons, let us first take a look on the characteristics of the human persons being in experience. First, persons are open and relational. In other words, we consider human persons as social beings, which means that we were born to be with others. Or let us simply say that being a person means being by others. It is for this reason that we keep on believing in the saying that no man is an island. Indeed, human persons naturally belong to others, wherein human persons can interact and relate with. Second, human persons are conscious beings. It means that we are aware of ourselves and, of course, of everything that is happening around us. Our consciousness is part of our being as human persons, created and gifted with different senses, which lead us to be aware of our surroundings. Third, human persons in experience as an embodied spirit, which actually denotes the unity of the soul and the body. In our previous topic, we talked about human person as composite of body and soul. And like what we have said, that made us different from all other creatures. Fourth, human persons in experience is also known as historical reality or realities, which strongly emphasize the fact that we are pilgrims on the way who gradually, through time, become our full selves. From there, we could say that no human person claims that she or he already and exactly knows herself or himself. And there is also no human person would change, transform, and would be converted towards the fullness of her or his personhood, attaining her or his highest potentials in a one snap of your finger or even overnight. Why? Because attaining one's highest potentials takes time. Kaya nga yung nagsasabi na magbabago na ako ngayon, babaguhin ko ang ugali ko, mag-aayos na ako, magsisipag na ako ng pag-aaral, that will never happen in a one snap of your finger or overnight. Because that decision, that kind of choice in your life would always take time to process and to pursue and accomplish in your life. And fifth, human persons in experience is also described as unique individuals, yet fundamentally equal. These characteristics of the human persons being in an experience explicitly explained the reality that no two persons are exactly the same. That is why we kept on saying that even twins have individual differences. And this is actually part of becoming human persons. Yet, we are fundamentally equal. What does it mean? In terms of rights, privileges, and even in the manner of acquiring and exercising of our freedom, we were gifted with equality. May pagkakapantay-pantay. Kaya nga hindi natin pwedeng sabihin na dahil mas mayaman ako lang ang may karapatan na gawin ang ganitong bagay. Dahil mas maganda ako lang ang may karapatan na mag-post sa FB. Ako lang ang may karapatan na mag-My Day. Ako lang ang may karapatan na mag-pictorial sa pagdiriwang ng aking birthday dahil ako lang ang maganda. No. Human persons in experience possessed the quality or the characteristics of being unique yet fundamentally equal. Again, these are the different characteristics of the human persons being in an experience. Understanding the freedom of the human persons will not be attained only through knowing the characteristics of the human persons in experience. That is why we will also be talking about ethics. Ethics is derived from the Greek word ethos, which means custom or character. It is a branch of philosophy that studies the rightness or wrongness of a human action. In particular, this branch of philosophy is concerned with questions of how human persons ought to act and the search for a definition of a right conduct and a good life. It is for this reason that the attempt to seek the good through the aid of reason is the traditional goal of ethicists. It must be noted, however, that there is no single, absolute definition of ethics. This is because ethics as a discipline is constantly evolving as a result of a change in socio-cultural and political context. For example, in the Greek tradition, ethics was conceived as relating to the concept of the good life. Thus, the ethical inquiry during this time was directed toward discovering the nature of happiness. In fact, Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics does not only present a theory of happiness, but also provides ways in which happiness is attained. Now, centuries later, a quite different orientation was introduced by the Judeo-Christian tradition. In this ethical tradition, the ideals of righteousness before God and the love of God and neighbor, not the happy or pleasant life, constitute the substance of ethics. Indeed, if we make an effort to reconcile these views, we are faced with the difficult task of defining the relationship between doing what is right and being happy. Again, it is for this reason that we cannot have an absolute definition of ethics. It is also important to note that the ethics is not the same with morality, although many philosophers believe that the two terms can be used interchangeably. This is because the former denotes the theory of right action and the greater good, while the latter indicates practice, that is, the rightness or wrongness of a human action. In other words, ethics undertakes the systematic study of the underlying principles of morality. Hence, it is interested primarily in the illustration of a more general problem and the examination of underlying assumptions and the critical evaluation of moral principles. Morality, on the other hand, is more prescriptive in nature. It tells us what we ought to do and exhorts us to follow the right way. According to Terence McConnell, morality is characterized as an end-governed rational enterprise whose object is to equip people with a body of norms that make for peaceful and collectively satisfying coexistence by facilitating their living together and interacting in a way that is productive for the realization of the general benefit. For example, a religious leader may ask her followers to be good at all times. In this way, a moralist may want to keep alive the values she considers to be worthwhile and to improve the moral quality of the community where she belongs. Hence, morality at the very least aims to guide one's action by reason and gives equal weight to the interests of each individual affected by one's decision. Indeed, this gives us a picture of what it really means to be a morally upright person. Based on the brief discussion above, we may conclude that ethics is the science of morals, while morality is the practice of ethics. We have also the different types of ethics. During the mid 20th century, according to Sumner, a certain theory in the methodology of ethics has gradually become more and more widely accepted, at least by British and American philosophers. According to this position, the two ways of doing ethical inquiry are the normative ethics and meta-ethics. On the one hand, normative ethics is prescriptive in nature, as it seeks to set norms or standards that regulate right and wrong or good and bad conduct. This may involve articulating the good habits that we should acquire, the duties that we should follow, or the consequences of our behavior on others. Hence, normative ethics normally attempts to develop guidelines or theories that tells us how we ought to behave. For example, Immanuel Kant's claim that an act is morally right if it is done for the sake of duty. Metaethics, on the other hand, is descriptive in nature. According to Sumner, metaethics is allegedly constituted, at least in part, by questions of the meanings of the various ethical terms and functions of ethical utterances. Hence, if a normative ethical inquiry is evaluative and prescriptive, metaethics is analytical and descriptive. Put simply, metaethics is a type of ethical inquiry that aims to understand the nature and dynamics of ethical principles. It asks questions about the nature and origin of moral facts, as well as the way in which we learn and acquire moral beliefs. Thus, for example, if normative ethics urges us to do good at all times, metaethics asks the question, what is good? For sure, if a moral philosopher attempts to address the questions, what is good, what is justice, why should I be moral, then that moral philosopher is doing metaethics. Hence, when Plato proposed an answer to the question, why should I be moral, Plato was doing metaethics. Indeed, Plato raised a metaethical question. In the course of the development of ethics, applied ethics became its third major type. As its name suggests, applied ethics is the actual application of ethical or moral theories for the purpose of deciding which ethical or moral actions are appropriate in a given situation. For this reason, casuists, or known as the adherents of applied ethics, are concerned with individual moral problems, such as abortion or euthanasia, and attempt to resolve the conflicting issues that surround these particular moral problems. Casuists may also act on some occasions in an advisory capacity, such as guiding individuals in their choice of actions. For example, they may attempt to resolve the conflicting duties of a mother suffering from ectopic pregnancy, who has no other option than to abort the fetus. Applied ethics is usually divided into different fields. For example, we may talk about business ethics, which deals with ethical behavior in the corporate world, biomedical and environmental ethics, which deal with issues relating to health, welfare, and the responsibility we have towards people and our environment, and social ethics, which deals with the principles and guidelines that regulate corporate welfare within societies. Finally, the difference between the three major types of ethics can be illustrated in the following situation. A police officer shoots a terrorist who is about to blow up a crowded shopping mall. The act of the police officer is morally wrong according to metaethics because it is always wrong to kill. As is well known, killing in itself is intrinsically wrong. However, if the police officer does not shoot the terrorist, many innocent people will die or get injured. Though the police officer's act may be wrong, the adherents of normative ethics may say that it is the right thing to do in this particular situation because not doing so will result in the death of so many people. Hence, the action might be morally correct. Finally, the casuist may say that the police officer is just doing his best to fulfill his duty, that is, to protect as many innocent lives as possible. All right? So I hope you have a better understanding of what do we mean by ethics. Baka itatanong nyo sa akin, Ma'am Rosil, what is the significance of understanding ethics in relation with understanding the human freedom or the freedom of the human person? So like what I have said earlier, the freedom of the human person is grounded in what we call ethics and morality. And that is why, for the next video presentation, we will now go deeper in the difference between ethics and morality. It must be noted, however, that the difference between ethics and morality is not that significant. In fact, the former is essentially synonymous with the latter. Etymologically speaking, ethics comes from the Greek word ethos, while morality from the Latin word mos or mores, if it is used in a plural form, both words referring to customary behavior. For this reason, we may use the word immoral in lieu of the word unethical, or we may use the word moral instead of the word ethical. This is the reason why we say that a moral person or ethical person is one who is good and thus the right thing, and an immoral person or an ethical person is one who is bad and thus what is wrong. As we can see, the terms ethics and morality can be used interchangeably. However, there is a fine line that divides the two. In other words, we can distinguish one from the other in some respects. The first idea that came to our mind when we asked the difference between morality and ethics is that the latter generally refers to the systematic study of the rightness and wrongness of a human action, while the former is generally understood as the rightness or wrongness of a human action. In this way, we can say that ethics is the specific branch of philosophy that studies the morality, that is, the rightness or wrongness of a human action. With this, we may initially conclude that ethics is the science of morals while morality is the practice of ethics. Based on the above initial discussion on the difference between the two terms, we can now draw the idea that ethics attempts to provide systems of moral principles and the reasons why these principles are valid. Hence, ethics is more concerned with theories that can be used to explain why a particular moral principle is valid or not, right or wrong. It is for this reason that ethicists have come up with some of the basic ethical principles that may help determine the rightness or wrongness of a human action. Some of these basic ethical principles are respect for persons, truthfulness and confidentiality, autonomy and informed consent, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. Now, as already mentioned, morality refers to principles of right and wrong behavior, or rightness and wrongness, that is, goodness and badness of human actions. And more importantly, in determining the rightness or wrongness of human actions, the moral agent is guided by the broader rules or principles of ethics. For instance, the person's moral belief that killing is wrong may stem from the basic ethical principle of respect for persons or non-maleficence. Indeed, this example further explains the basic difference between ethics and morals. If ethics says that killing is wrong because it violates the basic ethical principles of respect for persons or non-maleficence, morality, on the other hand, says do not kill because it is wrong. Again, this is the reason why ethics is understood as the science of morals, while morality is the practice of the basic principles of ethics. Again, this is the difference between ethics and morality. All right, here we are. I do hope that you really understand what is meant by ethics as the science of morals and morality as the practice of ethics. So, we can now go with the realm of freedom. The concept of freedom has been widely used and applied in the analysis of Philippine society as a whole, as well as the application of freedom to individual rights. A very important question that must be brought to light is, what is freedom and how is it being exercised in the realm of morals? According to John Paul Sartre, who assumed the idea of radical freedom, by claiming that human being is condemned to be free, he believed that human being is an unconstrained free moral agent in the sense that he always has a choice in every aspect of his life. Okay, eto na, pumapasok na tayo sa pag-unawa at pagpapakahulugan, ano ba yung tinatawag nating kalayaan. Because in one way or another, every time that we will be asked by the question, what do we mean by freedom? We tend to give an answer that freedom is doing what we want, saying everything we want to say towards our neighbors, and so on and so forth. But in the context of philosophy, especially in the context of morality, if we talked about the freedom of the human person, it does not just focus on the capacity of the human person to do and to say everything he or she wants to say and do. Okay? That is actually a misconception about the freedom of the human person. Why? Because according to John Paul Sartre, human being is condemned to be free. Meaning, he has always a choice in every aspect of his life. So ito yung pinaglalaban ni John Paul Sartre, no? That in every situation that may happen in our lives, we could not say that I have no choice. Hindi daw natin pwedeng sabihin na wala kang choice. Kaya nga yung salitang no choice wala akong choice tatanggapin ko na lang. Gasgas na gasgas sa atin ang salitang yon. At kung titingnan natin, according to John Paul Sartre, there is no such thing as no choice at all. Why? Because whether you accept it or not, whether you like it or not, we are full of choices in our lives. We have always choices in our lives as a human person. Like for example, babarilin ka ng isang tao for kidnapping halimbawa, nakatutok sa iyo ang baril, you still have choice. Whether ibibigay mo kung ano ang hinihingi niya sa iyo or hindi mo ibibigay pero mamamatay ka. In that situation, you may see that you were still given choices. You were still given options to be considered in order for you to make a choice, confirm and be firm with your choice and be responsible enough for the consequences or any possible effects that your choice may be given up to you. Nakukuha po? So, ang pinaglalaban lang natin dito, hindi pwedeng wala kang choice. Dahil sa lahat ng nangyayari sa buhay ninyo, bakit ka napariwara? Bakit napasama ang buhay mo? Bakit mo sinira ang magandang buhay at biyaya na kaloob sa iyo ng Diyos? Hindi mo to pwedeng isisi sa ibang tao. Because the one who made choices, the one who decides is no other than you. Hindi ang mga magulang mo ang nagdidesisyon para sa'yo. Hindi ang kaklase mo, hindi ang teacher mo ang nagdidesisyon para sa'yo. Okay? Kaya nga in all aspects of the human lives, according to John Paul Sartre, we were always given that capacity to make choice because we always have choices in our lives. Accordingly, John Paul Sartre claims human being is nothing else but that which he makes of himself. Thus, human being is never compelled or determined. He is totally free and therefore totally responsible for all the things that he does. When we are exercising freedom in making choices, we are taking control and assuming full responsibility for the choices that we are making. Okay? So I will repeat that. Yes, we are capable of making choices in our lives. But that capacity of the human person to make decisions and choices in her or in his life is always accompanied with our greater responsibility. To be always responsible in the consequences of our decisions. For that, we may say that human being is never compelled or determined. Meaning to say, we cannot be judged by other people. No one can determine what will be our future is. Okay? Not even me as your subject teacher in philosophy, not even your classmate, your friend, or even other subject teachers. Walang sino man ang makapagsasabi. Hindi ibig sabihin na 75 ka sa philosophy ngayong buong semester na ito ay wala ka nang makakating sa buhay. It is not even anybody na nakakakita kung ano ang ginagawa mo, papaano ka nabubuhay bilang tao. But it is rather yourself. Why? Because it is you who make or who made decisions for yourself. So, in understanding the freedom of the human person, I want you to bear in mind that you are free, but this freedom is not absolute. Meaning to say, you could not do anything that you please without taking into consideration the norms of your society. You are governed at the same time by the mores of your society. And that mores are there to serve as a form of social control to limit, govern, or even regulate your behavior in order to uphold and maintain order in your society. So anong ibig sabihin po nito? Yes, we are free, yet we are limited. Bakit? Because we cannot take away the norms, the regulations, the rules of our society where we belong. That is why we are understanding freedom in the context of morality. Kasi hindi natin pwedeng basta baliwalain na lamang ano ang ipinatutupad na alituntunin ng iyong komunidad na kinabibilangan. Or else, there would be chaos. Kung magdidesisyon ka base sa kung ano lamang ang kagustuhan mo, ano lamang ang makapagpapasaya sa'yo, at ano lamang ang ikagiginhawa ng sarili mo, there would be a problem. Okay? Magkakaroon tayo ng problema tungkol dyan. Kaya nga babalik at babalik tayo, what is the origin, what is the main meaning or definition of what we meant by freedom. Sabi natin, freedom is not just doing anything you want or saying anything you want towards your neighbors, but rather, it is always doing what is right, what is best, what is good, and what is just in accordance with the mores, with the norms, rules, regulations established in your society. From there, we could say that the freedom of the human person, from the moral sense of the word, assumes that one is a free moral agent. Moral, in this sense, is when one is free to make his choice in accordance with his own moral discernment of what is good and bad. Moreover, as the agent taking full responsibility for his own actions and is using his rational and emphatic capacity as a moral being. So this is what am I telling you before or a while ago, that a human person is subjected to make decision and choice in his life, but it should be always in accordance with what is right, what is just, what is good, and what is true. Hindi tayo gumagawa ng isang desisyon, hindi natin ginagamit or inaabuso ang kalayaan natin sa pamamagitan ng paggawa ng anumang bagay na labag sa kung ano ang tinatawag nating moral. That is why we come to think and we come to realize and study what is meant by morality, what is meant by ethics, so that you may be able to discern and to exercise and practice your freedom in always in accordance with a moral discernment. That is why in every decision that you will make, you have to always consider your rational and emphatic capacity as moral being. Again, that made us unique, yet fundamentally equal. And that made us unique and different from all other creatures. And from that, according to John Mothershed, the author of the book entitled Ethics, Modern Conception of the Principle of Right, there are two necessary conditions for morality to occur. Okay? Again, wag po tayong malilito ha. We are talking about freedom in the context of the morality. Kaya hindi po natin maiiwasan na hindi mabanggit ang tinatawag nating moralidad. And these two, namely, freedom and obedience. According to John Mothershed, freedom is assumed when one is making his choices and is the agent that is taking full responsibility in planning his life and in the process, planning and budgeting his actions for some future outlook or goals in accordance with his moral and rational capacity to know and discern what is right and wrong. Paulit-ulit na po tayo dito, ano? So, palagi nating binibigyang diin that freedom is not just doing and saying anything what you want, okay? But rather, it is your capacity as a human person to make choices and decisions in accordance with what is right and wrong. Okay? Aside from that, according to John Mothershed, our freedom is always accompanied with a great obligation. And that obligation is construed as one's duty to himself to exercise freedom as a moral being. Meaning, it is seen as his duty to himself to do this budgeting and planning for the future because the future is yet to be and the only way to make it better is by being obliged to do so. So, wag tayong matatakot, sabihin natin, ay, wag na lang akong magdesisyon, wag ko na lang gamitin ang freedom ko para hindi ko maabuso kung ano ang kalayaan na meron ako. No, because according to John Mothershed, freedom is accompanied by obligation. And it is obliged for us, it is required for us to do the budgeting, to do the planning, what will be our future. Again, the main author of our own story is no other than ourselves. Mulit-muli kong sasabihin sa inyo, tayo ang manunulat na siyang gumagawa ng sarili nating kwento. Kung kaya nga, it is up to your hands what will be the ending of our story. If you will end your story sad, if you will end your story as a tragic story, it is up to you. Because it is you who wrote or who writes your own story. Okay? You are not free to be unfree. Meaning to say, in making moral decisions and choices, it is within the capacity of the human person as an active and pre-moral agent to exercise his freedom of choice as his obligation to himself. So it is just a summary of everything that we have taken up. Again, it is your responsibility to exercise your freedom well. The human person is free to make choices in the realm of morality. Always remember that. That is a matter of taking full responsibility for one's action and being obliged to do so. Let us now clarify the discussion through some examples. When was the last time that you blamed other people for a mistake that you made? There is a tendency for one to blame others for choosing the course of action that one has taken. For example, there was a teenage girl who made the mistake of going on with a romantic encounter with her first boyfriend and who became pregnant at the age of 17. Later on, when the young couple began to experience hardships of having to raise a family at a very young age, their promise of loving each other in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, quickly flies out of the window. In this case, the capacity to make choices and moral decisions together with the consequences that they entail could change the course of their life. Freedom in making choices entails the process of reflection and deliberation on the consequences that our actions might entail. It is one's obligation to oneself to exercise one's rationality to the fullest without forgetting one's humanity and his capacity for empathy. Yes, we are free, yet we are unfree. Meaning to say that we have to be always responsible in all our decisions in our lives. And in order for us to have that spiritual discernment, always learn how to listen. Matuto tayong makinig. Okay? Always consider options. Options are parts of our lives. Hindi pwedeng dun kaagad tayo ano yung desisyon natin. You have to always consider ano ba ang mga pagpipilian. Kaya nga sa test na multiple choices, di ba? Actually, multiple choices is a type of test that gives us a lesson in our lives. Okay? It gives us morals. Bakit? Kasi sa multiple choice, di ba? Kung titingnan natin, ang daming pagpipilian. But at the end of the test, you have to be firm with your decision. Pipili ka lang ng isa at kailangan mo yung panindigan. And you have to be responsible whether the result of your decision or your choice will be correct or not. Okay? It is one's obligation again and again to oneself to exercise one's rationality. Gamitin natin yung ating kakayanan na mag-isip. Bakit ba tayo naging tao? Because we were gifted with that intellect. So in making decisions and choices in our lives, live that to the fullest. And please do not forget that your decision in life must be always grounded on the reality that you are human being and you have that capacity for empathy. And for that, thank you very much.